two women braved the jungle to fulfill a dream, to build, with their own hands, a house by a lake. No machines, no concrete, just simple tools and a lot of courage. The goal is to live freely, in harmony with nature, away from the hustle and bustle of the city. In the unexplored terrain, every branch cut and every stone removed marks the beginning of a transformation. They seek more than shelter, they seek purpose, simplicity, and connection with their surroundings. In 120 days, they intend to build a refuge from scratch, proving that it is possible to live differently, with less, but with much more essence. The heat was intense when the new day began. The song of the birds still echoed through the sky, but the time of contemplation was short. It was time to act. With the area already partially cleared, the two women knelt on the damp floor and began to mark the boundaries of the future house. Using wooden stakes and rustic ropes, they traced the perimeter where they would erect the walls. The space would not be large, but enough to house comfort and safety. Before any construction, they needed to understand the relief. They walked around, analyzing the slope of the terrain, the type of soil, the proximity of water. Avoiding waterlogging and ensuring the stability of the structure were priorities. After careful observations, they chose a higher, firmer spot with partial shade ideal for protecting from rain and sun. Then came the excavations. With shovels and their own hands, they dug deep holes to support the supporting columns. Each hole took time. The soil was uneven, sometimes hard, sometimes too soft. They found thick roots, buried stones and even anthills, which they had to divert without destroying. Nothing was easy, but none gave up. The job required strength, yes, but also calmness and strategy. For the main columns, they cut down medium forest trees. Never the largest, never in excess. They chose carefully those that were in denser areas, to maintain the balance of the environment. After each cut, they thanked him in silence. It was a simple gesture, but full of meaning. That construction would only make sense if it was done with respect to nature. The logs, heavy and uneven, were carried on the shoulders. One by one, fit into the dug holes. Then they used stones and compacted earth to fix them. Every column raised was a victory. The foundation of the house was beginning to form, visible, solid, real. As sweat dripped down their faces, they looked at each other in silence. It wasn't just wood they were putting on the floor. It was courage. Each firm structure told a story of effort, of decision, of facing the unknown. And even with aches in their arms, scratches on their legs and sun-scarred skin, they held firm. They knew that every home starts from the bottom, and there is no stronger foundation than determination. By late afternoon, with the sun descending behind the trees, the first structures were standing. The forest seemed to watch this progress in silence. The space began to take shape, as if nature, little by little, was accepting that presence. But that was just the foundation. The real challenge lay ahead, lifting the walls, fitting each log, adjusting angles, creating balance without cement or screws. It would be time to turn loose pillars into a solid structure. And so, with their base in the ground and their hearts full of will, they prepared for the next step, building the walls of resistance. The sun had not yet fully awakened when the women were already on their feet, prepared for another day of hard work in the jungle. After laying the foundation, the next step required precision and patience, erecting the walls that would give shape and protection to the house. The silence of the morning was filled by the sound of logs being lifted and ropes being tightened. The pillars began to take shape. Thick trunks, carefully chosen, were brought from the nearby forest. Not just cut, but selected to ensure strength and durability. With ancient mooring techniques, using lianas and natural fibers, they were firmly attached to the wooden base already fixed in the ground. Without nails or power tools, each loop was made by hand, with painstaking attention. It was impressive how the structure was gaining height, almost as if the house was growing along with the forest. The pillars were not just physical supports, they represented hope and determination. Each piece of wood brought with it the effort of those who believed that it was possible to build something simple, but lasting, with their own resources and respect for nature. For the walls, they used thin, flexible bamboos, lined up carefully to form a sturdy but breathable barrier. Bamboo, abundant in the region, was perfect for this type of construction. Light, strong, and renewable. After stringing the bamboos between the pillars, they modeled a mixture of clay and clay with their own hands. The material was carefully applied, filling the spaces between the bamboos, forming a wall that insulated from wind and rain, keeping the interior cool and protected. The work was tiring, but each movement carried meaning. The house wasn't just shelter, it was a symbol of a new way of living. A simpler way, connected, in harmony with what the jungle offered. The silence between the hammering and tying was broken only by the light conversation of the women, who shared dreams and learnings. Over the weeks, the house began to look less like a makeshift structure and more like a real home. The smell of fresh wood, wet earth, and surrounding greenery filled the air. The building pulsed with life, as if it were part of the forest itself. The passage of time brought more confidence. With each bamboo placed, the house grew stronger, ready to face the jungle climate. Still, they knew the challenge didn't end there. The house needed a roof, doors, windows, and details to be complete. But the most important thing was already done: the foundation, the walls, and the unwavering will to continue. The connection between them and the environment grew every day, and the lake, which was once only a distant sight, now seemed to guard that refuge with affection. Construction was moving forward, but the journey was far from over. With the walls erected and the structure taking shape, the next step would be to give protection from the sun and rain, build the roof that would close the shelter, bringing comfort and security for the days to come. The jungle watched silently as the house came to life, and the women prepared for the next chapter of their story. The sun was already shining brightly when the two women began to prepare the mixture that would give life to the walls of the house. It was not just any material. It was clay, a natural resource that, combined with water and straw, would turn into a real shield against the heat and humidity of the jungle. With calloused hands and precise movements, they set to work, knowing that this was a crucial moment for construction. Mixing clay with water seemed simple, but there was a technique they learned little by little. The right amount of each ingredient made all the difference so that the mortar was firm and durable. The straw, in turn, acted as a natural reinforcement, preventing the walls from cracking when drying under the scorching sun. It was an ancestral art, passed down through generations, which they rescued with respect and patience. With each handful of molded clay, the walls came to life. The hands that once carried logs and tied bamboos now modeled an earthy, smooth, firm surface. The texture that emerged was rustic, yet cozy, with small imperfections that reminded one of the surrounding nature itself. There was no hurry. The process required calm so that the clay dried evenly and resistantly. As they worked, they felt the connection grow. The land, the lake, the forest, everything seemed to be part of that joint effort. The house, which was still a structure under construction, began to breathe like something alive, part of the jungle and at the same time a safe haven. The midday heat intensified the drying process. The walls absorbed the sun and slowly hardened, gaining color and texture. The earthy tone contrasted with the vibrant green of the trees and the blue of the lake, creating a natural palette that seemed made by the forest itself. Each layer applied was an extra step towards protecting that home. But ground art wasn't just for thermal insulation. It was also a form of resistance and sustainability. The walls, made with local resources, dispensed with industrialized materials that could harm the environment. They showed that it was possible to build in a simple, clean, and effective way, respecting the natural balance. Even in the face of intense work, women found moments of joy and learning. They laughed at failures, celebrated achievements, and shared stories as they shaped the house. It was more than physical construction. It was the building of a way of life. As the day drew to a close, the walls were firm, dry in parts and increasingly protecting the inside of the shelter. The home began to take shape, not only in the logs and bamboos, but in that earthy layer that gave warmth and security. However, the work was not over. The next challenge would be to protect that structure from rain, strong sun, and constant jungle wind. For this, an essential element was to come: the roof. And so, with hands dirty with clay and hearts full of hope, they prepared to move forward, building what would be the next big step in the journey. The work was not only erecting walls and molding clay. Sometimes it was necessary to stop and observe what was around. This was exactly what happened when the two women approached the lake, a mirror of water that reflected the sky and all the transformation that was already happening there. The pond was not just a beautiful setting, it was a source of life, rest, and inspiration. After intense weeks, they felt the need to create a more direct connection with the water. The lake, which previously seemed distant, needed to be accessible and integrated into the refuge. Patiently, they began to plan a small wooden staircase that would descend to the shore. The design required delicacy. The material had to withstand constant contact with moisture, and the construction had to respect the natural balance of the soil and surrounding stones. Using leftover logs and bamboos, cut and adjusted to the right size, they set up firm and safe steps. Each piece was carefully fitted, tied, and reinforced to prevent accidents. The staircase slowly emerged, turning access to the lake into an invitation to tranquility. It was the path to a cool bath, to clean water, and to moments of pause and reflection. But the work did not stop there. They knew that the area near the lake needed protection to prevent erosion and ensure safety. With their hands on the earth, they collected natural stones scattered along the shore. Large, sturdy stones that would be used to create a low, natural wall. Thus, the soil would be firm, protected from the force of water and rain. The task was tiring but rewarding. Placing each stone in the right place, respecting the shape of the terrain, required attention and patience. Gradually, the space was transformed. The surroundings of the house were no longer just dense forest, but a harmonious environment where water and construction talked to each other. The sound of the pond, with its small waves touching the stones, mingled with the singing of birds, the rustling of leaves, and the rustling of the wind. It was a natural symphony that filled the air, lulling the daily effort and bringing a deep sense of achievement. For women, that moment was special. It was the recognition that the dream was no longer just the house. It was the whole place, the perfect integration between building and nature. Every detail, from the staircase to the stone wall, showed care and respect. Even with the progress, they knew there was still a lot to do. The house needed finishes, weather protection, and adjustments to ensure comfort for months to come. The journey continued, full of challenges, but also of discoveries. The lagoon, once a distant setting, now pulsed with life along with the refuge. It was a symbol of balance, patience, and harmony. And as the sun began to set, illuminating the water with golden hues, they prepared to move forward. The next step would be to ensure that the home withstood the weather, protecting those who lived there with a strong and safe roof. The structure of the house was finally complete, and the next challenge was to transform that space into a real home. The dry clay walls, the firm pillars, and the staircase to the lake already gave shape to the jungle refuge. But inside, it still lacked the warmth that would make that place more than just shelter, a space where one could rest, dream, and live with simple comfort. With natural resources at their disposal, women began to create improvised furniture. They used wood from the forest itself to build rustic, resistant, and simple beds. The logs were cut and sanded to size, fitted together to form firm foundations. On them, they put straw and dry leaves to give a little more softness, a modest comfort, but enough to rest after intense days of work. Handmade hammocks also took place in the interior of the house. Made with cotton threads and natural fibers that they learned to braid, they were hung between pillars, ready to lull sleep to the rhythm of the sounds of the jungle. The network was not only functional, it was a symbol of the simplicity sought in that place. To live with a minimum, but to live well. Utensils were created with creativity. Small tables, benches, and shelves emerged from branches and logs, combined in a practical way to store essentials. Clay pots were placed near the makeshift campfire area where they prepared their meals. Each piece carried the touch of the hands that created it, showing that it was possible to do a lot with little. The interior of the house, although rustic, was cozy. The earthy walls kept the room cool during the day and muffled the cold at night. The light coming through the small bamboo windows created delicate designs on the surfaces, as if nature itself was decorating the space. There was no luxury or technology, but the peace was palpable. The distant sound of the lake, the rustling of leaves, and the singing of birds formed a natural soundtrack that accompanied the moments of rest. Being there, in that space built with effort and respect, was a daily reward. More than a physical shelter, that house represented a new way of living. A style that valued the essential, that respected nature, and that invited to slow down. With each handmade item, with each thought-out detail, the idea was reinforced that comfort does not depend on extravagance, but on connection and simplicity. However, even with the interior ready, the jungle weather was unpredictable. Storms and strong winds could appear at any moment. So they knew they needed to prepare the house to face the coming seasons. Protection from rain and heat would be essential to ensure the continuity of that dream. And so, with tired bodies but strengthened spirits, they looked at what they had already done and prepared for the next step, reinforcing protection from the weather and ensuring that their jungle home was truly safe. After 120 intense days, the dream finally took concrete form, or rather, alive. The house that was once just an idea now stood firmly and organically in the forest, integrated perfectly with the nature around it. From the outside, it was difficult to tell where the construction ended and the jungle began. The clay walls had the tone of the earth, the woods followed the design of the natural trunks, and the roof of leaves moved in the wind as part of the trees. It was a work of the forest. Inside, the home was a sanctuary of simplicity and warmth. The rustic beds, the braided hammocks, and the smell of earth and wood filled the room with a sense of deep peace. The soothing sound of the lake mixed with that of birds and the wind, creating a unique and comforting soundtrack. Every corner of the house reflected work, dedication, and the will to live in harmony with the natural world. The women, now confident and empowered, walked through the interior of the space with pride. Every detail carried a story. The clay molded with his hands, the bamboos tied with vines, the ladder that led down to the crystal-clear water. It was all the fruit of courage and daily effort, of early mornings and bonfire-lit nights. But the house was more than a shelter from the weather. It was a symbol of personal and environmental transformation. There, in the jungle, they had created a space where freedom and respect coexisted, where it was possible to live without excesses, listening to the rhythm of nature and feeling part of it. The sun was beginning to set, tinting the sky with golden and orange hues. Soft light illuminated the facade of the house, highlighting the natural textures of the walls and wood. It was a silent spectacle that seemed to celebrate the achievement of all those weeks. The house, once a dream, now breathed a life of its own. But despite the sense of accomplishment, they knew this was only one stage of the journey. The jungle was full of surprises, and living with the environment would require constant care and adaptation. Each season would bring new challenges, and the house would always need attention to withstand and remain the safe haven they had built. More than bricks and clay, they had built a relationship with the earth, with the water, and with the sky. A relationship that required humility, learning, and respect. As the twilight wore on, they sat on the porch, looking out at the tranquil lake. The cool breeze brought a sense of renewal, and the eyes reflected the certainty that this place was no longer just a building. It was a living, pulsating home, ready to welcome new stories. And the story continued. Because building a house in the jungle was just the beginning of a transformed life.